Professor Gary Murphy is head of the Law and Government School at DCU. Historically, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil have been like chalk and cheese. Do you think they are any more similar nowadays?
Well, I do think there has been a certain narrowing of the issues that all political parties fight elections on, and I think that has come because of the European Union and Ireland's membership of the EC has certainly made the parameters of economic choice somewhat more limited. Also, if you look at things like social issues, there are less and less issues that really differentiate the political parties. And if you look at an issue like the Eighth Amendment, it has been parked to one side where it doesn't really become a significant policy issue during a general election. So in that context, the parameters for large scale sort of ideological differences between parties are now more narrower. Now we obviously have a significant left type of politics in this country associated with the AAA, PVP and others. But if you look at the two main parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, there is probably, I would have thought, even less distinction between them now than there was in a more historical context.
And do you think their economic ideals have become more similar or more different throughout the years?
Well, I think if you look at economics for both political parties, there was always a commonly held view amongst academics and political scientists and journalists, I think, who were politically aware that Fianna Fáil were more akin to a kind of a traditional Labour Party in that they got much of their support from the working class and they got much of their support from the small farming sector, the public service, again those in more administrative roles in the public service, guards, teachers, nurses as well. And Fine Gael was to some extent more the party of the propertied classes, the sort of well-to-do, the law library types, kind of private school views in an urban context, and large farmers in a rural context. And I think that probably held for much of the state's existence. And also there was a significant personality kind of dichotomy where clearly, the dominant figure of Eamon de Valera clearly had a significant impact on how people viewed politics in Ireland. Now, over the course of the last half a decade, in particular, since the economic crash of the last decade, I think people have become much more cognizant of voting for political parties on their own merits as distinct from culturally or historically. I think that particularly stands for urban Ireland, Dublin, Cork, Limerick, Galway to a lesser extent maybe. But in rural Ireland, I do think there are still significant cultural differences and historic differences which sort of differentiate Fianna Fáil from Fine Gael. Fianna Fáil is always say, the party that people who had their dinner in the middle of the day. Mm-hmm. Whereas Fine Gael were been seen as a more sort of well-heeled types. Whether that still holds true is not quite moot, it's not as significant as it once was.
Yeah, and there's some very influential backbenchers and grassroots members who are totally against coalition. Do you think these kind of people will keep the party stuck in the past and prevent them from moving forward and working together?
Well, I think those type of people will have a significant say on whether Fianna Fáil actually do go into coalition or partnership government with Fine Gael. I've always been of the view, and I've said it publicly since the election result became known, that it would be difficult for Micheál Martin to lead Fianna Fáil into a coalition government with Fine Gael, whereby Fianna Fáil was the smaller of the two parties. And I think that still holds. There is a strong residual resentment in Fianna Fáil towards Fine Gael, particularly again in rural Ireland. And while it makes no sense in one way, if you look at the partnerships that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have established at local level and council level, I think to cross that Rubicon at national level will still take some going. So it's one thing for Fianna Fáil to sort of abandon the core principle of coalition with the PDs or with Labour, who are obviously much smaller, the Greens from 2007. It's a much different thing to go into a coalition government as the smaller party, especially with the history of how smaller parties have suffered in coalition governments. Only need to look at the Labour Party's decimation in the recent general election to see how that holds up. So I think that would be difficult for him, and I always did think coalition forming would be difficult. Now I have to say it has been extraordinarily dragged out with these discussions with independents. But I think people who say there is no difference between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are slightly misreading the situation. There are differences. There are differences on policy issues, including water charges, which is not to be dismissed, I think. There are slight differences in taxation, and Micheál Martin clearly has moved Fianna Fáil to a sort of centre left, back where they would have seen themselves before the coalition with the PDs, where clearly Bertie Ahern might deny it, but I think it's categorically true that Fianna Fáil did go to the right under the influence of the PDs from that 1997 to 2007 period, and of course that to some extent brought with it the crash, and the crash in one way has changed the nature of Fianna Fáil. Fianna Fáil could never really have anticipated governing with Fine Gael as a minority partner, but of course once the crash came they bore the spectacular fruits of that with their terrible result in 2011. But the fact that they've come back significantly to 44 seats on 25% of the vote, you can see why they're not so keen on coalition, because they could have a reasonable expectation of going up if there was to be another election, whether that election will be in the short term or in a more maybe the next 18 months. I think there'd be a reasonable expectation they might well do better. So I think that's also has to be taken into mind in terms of the context of government formation.